And welcome everyone to our Meet the Men's Basketball Selection Committee series. I'm Andy Katz, pleased to be joined by Zach Lassiter, the athletic director at Abilene Christian University. And Zach, let's first deal with sort of your love of basketball and especially men's college basketball. Throughout the course of your administrative career, you've been at various stops and some pretty big hotbeds in the sport where there's huge value in this sport. But where did this love initially originate?
Yeah, since the day I was born, I think. I mean, I've always loved college basketball. I think the first, and I've been blessed, the first NCAA tournament game I ever attended in person was the 89-90 tournament. And if you remember, that was the LMU tournament, right? Hank Gathers had passed away. And so that LMU team went on a magical run. And I watched them play. And then they ran into a UNLV team and ended up winning the national championship. I think that was the team with Larry Johnson and Greg Anthony, Anderson Hunt, Stacey Ogman, right? So that was kind of my first tournament game, and I watched it on TV all my life, but to see it in person has been special. So yeah, as a fan, basketball has always been something special. Love the tournament, and then yeah, as getting to do this professionally, I've been at places like North Carolina and LSU that went to tournament, but actually my run with Oregon State was probably the longest tournament I've been a part of. That was the COVID year, right? And Wayne Tinkle did an amazing job with that group. We went through the Pac-12 tournament. You know, we probably weren't picked to win that tournament. Won 3 games in 3 days, and then hopped on a plane and went to Indianapolis, got all the way to the Elite Eight, and then Kelvin Sampson and that Houston team, took us out. But yeah, so always loved basketball. Blessed to be a part of it as a fan, as an administrator, and now for this opportunity. It's I still pinch myself that I get to do this.
So yeah, that's actually, I'm glad you opened that window because that was I think Oregon State was picked 12th. They ended up being a 12 seed, and they, like sort of that number 12, I remember, kept going. So that tournament, though, I think is a good indication because you were at Oregon State. They weren't supposed to be in. The school you're at now had the win over Texas. If I'm not mistaken, that was that same year.
You're right. That was the first time I'd ever heard of Abilene Christian University.
So that was in the bubble.
That's where I met them. Yeah, it was just us in the hotel and everyone else. And it was kind of a special time. It was when basketball was basketball, and you spent way too much time walking around the Indianapolis Convention Center. But it was, it was a surreal experience, but it also everyone did it for the love of the game.
So to that point, you've got two different spectrums here where you've got at the time, a power Pac-12 school gets in through the tournament, not expected. Then you've got a team from a one-bid league that pulls off a miraculous upset and advances. So two different kind of spectrums that you can sort of appreciate that now you're at that school and you can see what it meant. And I'm curious first, now that you're there, and bubble or no bubble, like how much has that meant to putting them on the map, that when a school from a traditional one-bid league gets in and wins, what it means to that program?
Yeah, and not only wins, but beats the University of Texas, right?
In the same state.
In the state, right? I mean, that's why I think this is the best event in sports, right? Like there's 68 stories that start the tournament, and those stories are all different. And having worked the majority of my career at the high major level, I appreciated programs that had gone on to win national championships, that had won multiple games in the tournament, or where the basketball program was a part of it. But now being at a place like Abilene Christian University, a mid-major program, that the university really isn't well known outside of our region. Athletics was one of the platforms to be able to become a national conversation. And that opportunity to make the tournament, they had made it before that, had lost to Kentucky in the first round. And then they came back and had an opportunity to play Texas, winning that game. It's a conversation that when I got here and I asked people, what's the best memories of your life? They talk about that game. They talk about personally what it meant, but also from a university perspective, how it allowed us to go from a regional university to really a national university in that conversation. And so it is great. And every year there's a story like that, right? Like the ACU story is not a unique one. And it's fun to have all these schools interconnect, and in this setting, right? Those stories come to life, and it can change students' lives, it can change coaches' lives, but also a university perspective. It can really launch a university in a way that very other few things can, just because of our love for college sports, right? And our love of our alma maters and our love of March and March Madness. And there's so many people that may not even love sports that watch this tournament that get connected to these stories and see young people or universities that they don't know about. And then they remember that university in ways that down the road could pay dividends.
So now that you're actually one of the 12 decision makers, and I want to stress that it's one of 12, it's not solo. How much will you think about the seeding aspect of a team when it comes in, because you can see how much it matters from a one bid league, or the seeding aspect of a team that's not expected to get there had they not won their AQ from a power league, and how much that matters, because you saw it, from one side, and now you're at a school that, benefited from the seed that they got at that time as well. And, maybe it was, the Texas team they played or what have you, but, they weren't a 16. It wasn't a 16-1. So, that matters too.
Yeah, you're right. I think a lot of the attention can get into the first four in or last four out. And I think that's always something that gets covered. But I do think seeds matter, right? I mean, statistically, you look at the odds of a 12 beating a 5 is different than a 13 beating a 4 and a 14 beating a 3. And so as important as it is to make sure we get the top seeds right and we get the last four in and that right, I do think seed lines 12 through 16 matter a great deal in terms of which of those programs, primarily, right, almost exclusively automatic qualifying schools. There's really good basketball, Andy, at those leagues. You know that that's the case, and we've got to make sure that we spend as much time making sure we get those things right. And probably being at the mid-major level, it makes me appreciate more how much that matters. So I've gone from the last couple of years of watching WAC basketball to now watching basketball at every level. But I do think I have a greater appreciation for mid-major basketball and making sure that I'm not an advocate for those programs, but I'm being very intentional about trying to share my voice, but also recognizing, as you said, I'm one of 12, right? But I do think that having that experience, being part of an AQ league, helps me understand the challenges that those schools have of trying to get high major teams to play them, right, during the regular season. Like, we always talk about who you play, where was the game, and who did you beat. The recognition is some of those programs that are really strong, the major programs, may only get one or two quad one chances outside of the league, right? That may be at an MTE, or that may be primarily on the road somewhere. So I do think analyzing those teams, you got to be a little bit thoughtful of going beyond just who did you play, how many quad one games you have. You really got to watch those teams, and are those teams that deserve the seed that we ultimately give them.
Last thing, Zach, that voice in the room, in an era where it feels like the power's trying to take control. College football is its own animal. This seems like one of the few high-profile and critical committees that really has true representation of the diversity of Division One. And, from bottom to top, how critical is it to have those voices in that room that represent conferences that aren't, getting every high-profile television game and are at that mid-major, low-major level?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. I'm a new member. This is my first year, and so I walk into the first meeting, and I thought it was going to be like my family in Thanksgiving, where there's a kids table and there's an adults table, right? And I figured, I'd go sit at the kids table with all my fellow, mid major. It isn't like that. So not only is it important that we're all in the room, Andy, but I have found that everyone's voice matters. And amongst that 12, we take off whatever position we have currently, and we're trying to be stewards of the greatest event in college sports. I mean, the one that really binds us all together. And so I think we all take that responsibility very seriously. I think we understand the landscape of our industry, but I do love how we do that, right? That one person can't unilaterally decide anything. And each of our experiences, and I give Dan Gavitt and the staff credit about being super thoughtful about who's in the room, but then creating mechanisms and thoughts about how everyone's voice can be heard. And then just super grateful for the more experienced committee members, right, that have been there, that have set a culture and a tone to where, hey, this is something that we value everyone's voice being a part of it. And that makes the tournament better, as opposed to there being views of an us versus them, which I think you articulated. There are certainly parts of industry right now that's acute, right? And I'm just grateful that I don't see that. Mine has not been my experience being part of this committee.
Awesome. Well, glad you're on board. Look forward to seeing you, Indy. It's going to be a great tournament.
Great, Andy. Good to visit with you. Take care.